The sterile hum of the federal courthouse lobby reverberates through the cavernous space, a low, persistent drone that seems to absorb all other sounds, leaving only the crisp click of polished shoes on marble and the hushed murmurs of countless hurried conversations. Sunlight, filtered through tall, arched windows, casts long, anemic rectangles across the impeccably buffed floor, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the otherwise pristine air. The grand hall, a monument to austere authority, smells faintly of ozone from the omnipresent security scanners and a chemical disinfectant that fails to mask the faint, lingering scent of stale coffee from the ground floor kiosk. Bronze plaques commemorating past legal victories gleam dully on the walls, their engraved letters silent testaments to power and precedence. Uniformed security officers, rigid and watchful, stand sentinel at various checkpoints, their gazes sweeping over the diverse stream of humanity flowing through the building. Each face a potential threat in their vigilant eyes. The atmosphere is one of hushed tension, a palpable weight of solemnity that presses down on everyone, reducing individual voices to whispers and individual movements to cautious tiptoes. Agent Sterling Thorne, a man whose very presence commands attention, stands near the main security checkpoint, his posture radiating an almost aggressive self-assurance. His charcoal suit, meticulously tailored, fits his broad shoulders and trim physique, with an almost custom-made precision, hinting at an expensive taste that extends beyond mere attire. A silk tie, deep sapphire blue, peeks from beneath his jacket lapel. It's not perfectly symmetrical, a testament to his exacting nature. His silver watch, a substantial piece of Swiss engineering, gleams subtly beneath his cuff as he occasionally adjusts it, a gesture of impatience rather than necessity. Thorne is in his mid-40s, his face etched with sharp, intelligent lines, but his eyes, piercing shade of gray, often hold a glint of dismissive superiority. A faint, almost imperceptible sneer habitually plays at the corners of his mouth, a silent declaration of his inherent belief in his own infallible judgment. He considers himself a bulwark against chaos, a discerning mind capable of sifting through the dross of humanity to identify the truly problematic elements. He observes the arriving public with a critical, almost predatory gaze, his mind already categorizing and assessing, dismissing most as inconsequential, a few as potentially troublesome, and none as his equal. He holds himself with an air of profound importance, as if the very stability of the nation rests upon his broad shoulders, and he accepts this burden with a self-satisfied pride. He often pauses in his observations, his chin slightly elevated, as if waiting for the world to present him with an anomaly worthy of his superior intellect and authority. He finds a certain disdainful pleasure in the subtle power he wields, the way people instinctively avert their eyes or quicken their pace when they sense his scrutiny. He thrives on being the ultimate arbiter, the final word, the unassailable figure of federal power. His thoughts, though unspoken, often revolve around the inefficiency of others, the naive trust placed in procedures, and the absolute necessity of his own keen intuition to cut through the bureaucratic noise. He believes himself to be above the common rules, operating on a higher plane of insight. Into this meticulously controlled environment steps Specialist Maya Jenkins, a young woman whose presence, though militarily precise, seems almost incongruous against the backdrop of the courthouse's imposing grandeur. She is dressed in a crisp army dress uniform, its dark green fabric neatly pressed, the brass buttons on her jacket gleaming under the harsh overhead lights. The uniform, while perfectly fitted, does little to mask her youthful frame, which appears slender, almost delicate. Her dark hair is pulled back in a severe regulation bun, revealing a face that is still soft with the vestiges of adolescence, yet marked by an underlying seriousness that belies her apparent age. Her eyes, a deep, intelligent brown, are her most striking feature. They observe her surroundings with an almost preternatural calm, taking in every detail, missing nothing. She carries a small, regulation-issue black backpack slung over one shoulder, its contents presumably official and minimal. Maya moves with a quiet discipline, her steps measured and deliberate, a testament to her military training. Yet there is a subtle vulnerability in her posture, a slight hesitancy that suggests she feels the weight of the formal setting and the scrutiny of the uniformed personnel. She appears to be just another young soldier, perhaps fresh out of basic training, navigating the complexities of a federal building, seemingly outmatched by the sheer scale of the institution and the stern faces of those who represent its authority. She projects an image of quiet competence, but also of being distinctly underestimated, a small cog in a vast machine, easily overlooked or dismissed. Her youth and her rank as a specialist, one of the lowest enlisted ranks, conspire to make her seem utterly powerless in this arena, a mere pawn in a game played by much larger forces. She holds her head high, but her gaze occasionally flickers, betraying a flicker of apprehension, a natural reaction to being under such intense, unyielding observation. Yet beneath that surface nervousness, there is an undeniable core of steel, a subtle hint of resilience that only the most perceptive observer might detect. As Maya approaches the main security checkpoint, a minor bottleneck forms. A group of lawyers, engrossed in a discussion, inadvertently block the entrance to the metal detectors. Maya waits patiently, her hands clasped loosely in front of her, her gaze politely averted. Thorne, observing from his vantage point, notices her. His eyes, typically dismissive of the general public, narrow slightly as they land on her uniform. He sees a young black woman, a soldier of a relatively low rank, and an instant, almost reflexive judgment forms in his mind. He perceives a potential disruption, an individual who might not understand the gravity of the federal environment, or perhaps, in his biased view, someone who might attempt to skirt the rules. His internal monologue, unburdened by self-doubt, suggests to him that such individuals often harbor a misplaced sense of entitlement or a lack of proper respect for established procedures. He decides to intercede, to assert his authority and ensure the smooth flow of security, or more accurately, to assert his dominance. He pushes off the marble wall he was leaning against, his movements fluid and deliberate, and strides towards the bottleneck. His presence is immediately felt. The lawyers, sensing his approach, quickly part, their conversation abruptly silenced. Thorne ignores them, his gaze fixed solely on Maya. He stops directly in front of her, his height and broad frame casting a shadow over her. His voice, when it comes, is a low, resonant rumble, laced with a condescension that is almost imperceptible to the casual listener, but sharply evident to its recipient. He asks her if she has proper identification, his tone implying that he already doubts the validity of whatever she might present. He does not ask politely, he demands, his eyes sweeping over her uniform as if searching for an irregularity. Maya, though momentarily surprised by his sudden appearance, maintains her composure. She meets his gaze directly, her own eyes unwavering. She calmly informs him that she possesses all necessary identification and is prepared to present it. Her voice, though soft, carries an unexpected clarity, a quiet confidence that contrasts sharply with her seemingly vulnerable appearance. She explains that she is on official business, scheduled for a routine briefing with the Department of Justice's Military Liaison Office, providing the exact time and room number. Her words are precise, almost rote, as if she has rehearsed them, or perhaps more accurately, as if she is accustomed to delivering them under scrutiny. Thorne dismisses her explanation with a slight shake of his head, a gesture of profound skepticism. He tells her that her appearance and her apparent youth suggest she might be mistaken about her purpose here, or perhaps misinformed about the proper channels for entry. He implies that a specialist, particularly one so young, would not typically be granted access to such high-level briefings without extensive prior clearance, a clearance he suggests she clearly lacks. He asks her to step aside from the main line, indicating a small cordoned-off area used for secondary screening. His tone suggests an order, not a request, and his hand gestures towards the area, with an imperious sweep, as if directing a subordinate. He is not genuinely concerned about security. He is asserting his power, enjoying the discomfort he perceives in her. He believes he is exposing a minor deception, or at least a significant misunderstanding on her part, and he relishes the opportunity to correct it. He stands with his chest slightly puffed out, his shoulders back, his posture radiating an unassailable authority, daring her to question his judgment. He watches her face for any sign of fear or compliance, a subtle smirk playing on his lips. Maya's expression remains remarkably neutral, yet a subtle shift occurs in her eyes. The initial flicker of apprehension fades, replaced by a cool, analytical gaze that seems to assess Thorne himself, rather than merely his words. She does not immediately move to the designated area. Instead, she quietly informs him that her orders are explicit and that her clearance has been pre-verified through the standard federal interagency protocols. She then asks him, with a politeness that borders on a challenge, if he would like her to provide the specific case number and the name of the authorizing officer, implying that she possesses such information readily. Her calm demeanor, rather than appearing submissive, now seems almost unnerving to Thorne, a quiet defiance that he finds both irritating and perplexing. He expects bluster or meek compliance, not this measured, almost academic pushback. He finds her composure irritating, a subtle affront to his authority. He sees her steady gaze as a challenge, and his irritation begins to fester. Thorne's smirk tightens, his patience visibly wearing thin. He tells her that he finds her insistence curious and her demeanor suspicious. He reminds her that federal agents have the authority to detain individuals who pose a potential security risk or whose stated purpose cannot be immediately corroborated. He suggests that her continued presence in the main thoroughfare, coupled with her unusual composure, is now becoming a hindrance and a potential breach of protocol. He states, in a voice that now carries a sharper edge, that he will personally verify her credentials, a process he implies will be lengthy and inconvenient for her. He implies that she is wasting his valuable time and, by extension, the government's resources. He steps closer, subtly invading her personal space, his imposing figure designed to intimidate. He waits for her to flinch to show any sign of capitulation. He expects her to crumble under the weight of his authority, to finally admit some minor infraction or simply to obey. But Maya does not flinch. Her gaze remains steady, piercing, almost as if she is looking through him rather than at him. A tiny, almost imperceptible muscle twitches in her jaw, the only outward sign of the immense inner control she exerts. She acknowledges his statement about his authority, her voice still level, but then she quietly reminds him that federal protocol also dictates that a detainment requires a stated probable cause, beyond mere suspicion, especially for a uniformed service member on official duty. She adds that she is fully aware of her rights and the established military-civilian liaison procedures. Her articulation of these specific legal and procedural details is delivered without a hint of emotion, almost as if she is reciting a regulation from a manual, a disconcerting display of knowledge from someone he has already dismissed as a mere junior soldier. Her composure, far from suggesting fear, now radiates a quiet, unyielding strength. It is a strength born not of physical power or overt aggression, but of an absolute certainty in her own position and knowledge. The air around her, despite the perceived vulnerability of her youth and rank, seems to thicken with an unseen energy, a silent testament to an inner resolve that Thorne, in his arrogance, utterly fails to comprehend. He sees only a young black woman challenging his authority, and his disdain deepens, blinding him to the subtle, almost imperceptible flicker of something far more profound in her intelligent, unwavering eyes. He is completely unaware that this quiet specialist, whom he so readily dismisses, carries a lineage and a depth of experience that extends far beyond the confines of her current rank, a truth that will soon unravel his meticulously constructed world. He prepares to escalate the confrontation, convinced he holds all the cards, utterly oblivious to the quiet, formidable power he is about to unleash. Agent Sterling Thorne's carefully constructed facade of professional calm begins to crack around the edges, a hairline fracture appearing in the polished surface of his arrogance. He observes Maya Jenkins, this young black woman in a specialist's uniform, standing before him with an unsettling composure, her eyes steady, her voice devoid of the tremor he expects, the fear he anticipates. His initial assessment of her as a minor inconvenience easily dismissed now warps into something more irritating, more personal. He finds her calm defiance and affront, a direct challenge to his authority and the very order he believes he embodies. His internal monologue, usually a smooth, self-congratulatory stream of infallible judgment, now sputters with a nascent frustration. He considers her continued questioning of his authority not merely insubordination, but a deliberate act of disrespect, a calculated provocation from someone he deems inherently beneath him. He thinks of her youth, her race, her low military rank, and a deep-seated contempt solidifies within him. These types, his mind sneers, always trying to leverage some obscure rule, some technicality, to avoid accountability, to get special treatment. He views her as an embodiment of everything he instinctively distrusts, an individual who, in his prejudiced worldview, lacks the proper understanding of hierarchy, the inherent respect for established power structures, and the quiet obedience he demands from those he perceives as lesser. He dismisses her military uniform as mere costuming, a flimsy pretense for someone who clearly does not grasp the true weight of federal law enforcement. She is, in his eyes, a disruption, a misplaced piece in his meticulously ordered world, and he feels an almost visceral need to put her back in her place, to demonstrate the unassailable power he wields. He takes another step closer, deliberately narrowing the space between them, his imposing height and broad shoulders designed to overwhelm. He expects her to recoil, to finally show a flicker of apprehension, but she remains rooted, unyielding. His jaw tightens, a visible sign of his escalating irritation. He tells her, his voice now lower, more menacing, that her continued insistence on obscure regulations is not only curious but actively suspicious. He states that her unusual composure, her apparent lack of proper deference, and her refusal to immediately comply with a direct order from a federal agent are all indicators of a potential security risk. He emphasizes that federal agents possess the inherent authority to detain any individual, regardless of their purported status or uniform, if they are deemed to pose a threat or if their identity and purpose cannot be immediately and unequivocally verified. His words are designed to intimidate, to crush her will, to make her understand the futility of her resistance. He watches her eyes intently, searching for the crack, the moment of capitulation. He believes he is simply enforcing protocol, but his thoughts betray a deeper, more insidious motivation. He enjoys the power, the control, the discomfort he perceives in others. He relishes the thought of making an example of her, of demonstrating that no one, especially not someone like her, can challenge his authority without consequence. Maya, however, does not flinch. Her gaze remains steady, clear, reflecting Thorne's escalating anger with an almost dispassionate calm. Her internal landscape is a maelstrom of calculated observation, a silent symphony of analytical thought. She processes Thorne's words, not as threats but as predictable data points. She notes his tightening jaw, the subtle tremor in his voice, the almost imperceptible widening of his pupils, all indicators of a loss of control, a descent into the very emotional instability he projects onto others. Her mind, honed by years of specialized training that few outside her specific unit even knew existed, races through scenarios, contingency plans, and legal precedents. She recalls the rigorous simulations, the hours spent in sterile rooms, facing actors specifically trained to embody this precise brand of entitled authority, to push boundaries, to provoke. Her instructors had drilled into her the absolute necessity of unwavering composure, the power of calm, factual resistance against emotional aggression. She understands that Thorne's prejudice is not merely personal, it is systemic, a cancerous growth within the very institutions designed to uphold justice. Her mission, far grander than a simple briefing, is to expose these systemic flaws, to gather irrefutable evidence of how deeply ingrained discrimination could warp due process and erode civil liberties. She is not merely a specialist, she is an instrument, a finely tuned sensor designed to detect and record anomalies within the system, a quiet vanguard for a profound shift. This confrontation, she realizes, is not an unforeseen obstacle. It is the very essence of her assignment. She recognizes Thorne as a perfect specimen, a living embodiment of the bias her unit is tasked with identifying and dismantling. She allows a faint, almost imperceptible thought to surface. He is doing exactly as predicted. Thorne, misinterpreting her calm as either foolish naivety or stubborn insolence, decides to escalate. He tells her that her continued presence in the main thoroughfare, coupled with her unusual composure, is now becoming a hindrance and a potential breach of protocol. He declares, in a voice that now carries a sharper, more definitive edge, that he will personally verify her credentials, a process he implies will be lengthy, inconvenient, and ultimately fruitless for her. He implies that she is wasting his valuable time and, by extension, the government's resources. He steps even closer, his imposing figure designed to intimidate, to physically force her compliance. He expects her to crumble under the weight of his authority, to finally admit some minor infraction, or simply to obey. He believes himself to be above the common rules, operating on a higher plane of insight. He considers himself immune to challenge, his position and reputation ensuring that any rules he bends or breaks in the pursuit of his perceived duty will be overlooked, forgiven, or simply never discovered. He thinks of the countless times he has pushed boundaries, stretched regulations, or simply ignored inconvenient procedures, all without consequence. His colleagues defer to him, his superiors trust his judgment, and the public, he believes, is too meek or too ignorant to ever challenge a man of his standing. This young woman, he rationalizes, is merely a pawn, and he is a king. But Maya does not flinch. Her gaze remains steady, piercing, almost as if she is looking through him, rather than at him, seeing the rot beneath the polished exterior. A tiny, almost imperceptible muscle twitches in her jaw, the only outward sign of the immense inner control she exerts. She acknowledges his statement about his authority, her voice still level. But then she quietly reminds him that federal protocol also dictates that a detainment requires a stated probable cause, beyond mere suspicion, especially for a uniformed service member on official duty. Her words are not a plea, but a statement of fact, delivered with the precision of a surgeon. She adds, her tone unwavering, that she is fully aware of her rights and the established military-civilian liaison procedures, which include the immediate notification of her commanding officer and her agency's legal counsel in the event of any detainment or extended questioning. Her articulation of these specific legal and procedural details is delivered without a hint of emotion, almost as if she is reciting a regulation from a manual, a disconcerting display of knowledge from someone he has already dismissed as a mere junior soldier. Her composure, far from suggesting fear, now radiates a quiet, unyielding strength. It is a strength born not of physical power or overt aggression, but of an absolute certainty in her own position and knowledge. The air around her, despite the perceived vulnerability of her youth and rank, seems to thicken with an unseen energy, a silent testament to an inner resolve that Thorne, in his arrogance, utterly fails to comprehend. Thorne's smirk vanishes, replaced by a flicker of genuine surprise, quickly masked by renewed anger. He finds her calm, factual resistance profoundly unsettling. He expected bluster or fear, or perhaps even tears, not this quiet, intellectual counterpunch. He had anticipated an easy victory, a swift reassertion of his dominance, but she is not playing by his rules. His mental image of her as a simple, easily intimidated junior soldier shatters, replaced by a growing unease. He finds himself momentarily at a loss for words, a rare and deeply irritating sensation. He tells her, his voice now a low growl, that she is mistaken, that her understanding of protocol is clearly inadequate, and that her attempts to lecture a federal agent on his authority are both inappropriate and potentially actionable. He asserts that her refusal to comply with his direct order to step aside constitutes sufficient probable cause for a temporary detainment, citing the vague umbrella of security concerns. He is twisting the rules, bending them to fit his narrative, confident that his position will shield him from any repercussions. He believes that the sheer weight of his authority, combined with the general public's inherent deference to federal agents, will ensure his actions go unchallenged. He is the law in this moment, and he intends to enforce his will, regardless of the fine print. His internal monologue rationalizes his actions, telling him that this is necessary to maintain order, to prevent future challenges, to ensure the smooth operation of the courthouse. He sees himself as a guardian, and she, a potential threat to the sanctity of the system he protects. Maya's eyes, those intelligent brown pools, remain locked on his, observing the subtle shifts in his expression, the tightening of his jaw, the almost imperceptible tremor in his hand as he instinctively reaches for the radio clipped to his belt. She understands that his anger is a sign of his diminishing control, a tell that he is operating outside the bounds of proper procedure. She chooses her next words with surgical precision, each one a scalpel cut into his fabricated authority. She calmly informs him that his interpretation of probable cause is inaccurate under federal military-civilian liaison statutes, particularly concerning uniformed personnel operating on pre-cleared official duty. She then states, her voice still measured, that she must respectfully request his badge number and the name of his immediate supervisor for the record, as his actions are now creating an unwarranted obstruction of official military business and a potential violation of her civil liberties. She does not demand, she requests, yet the politeness of her tone carries a chilling undercurrent of absolute certainty, a quiet declaration of intent that unnerves Thorne more than any shout or protest ever could. She knows that this request, delivered with such composure, is a procedural tripwire, a formal escalation that he cannot easily dismiss or ignore without further exposing his own misconduct. She is not merely resisting, she is documenting, building a case, allowing him to dig his own grave with every prejudiced action and every disregard for protocol. Her thoughts are razor sharp. He is exposing the vulnerability. He is proving the point. She understands that this confrontation is not about her personal inconvenience, but about illuminating the deeply entrenched biases that corrupt the very foundations of justice, biases that her unit has been painstakingly preparing to confront. She is the first wave. Thorne's face darkens, a flush rising from his neck to his cheeks. He is accustomed to immediate compliance, to fear, to the subtle deference of those around him. This young woman, this specialist, asking for his badge number, invoking statutes with such clarity and confidence, is an anomaly he cannot process. He feels a surge of righteous indignation, a burning resentment that someone he considers so utterly beneath him dares to challenge him in this manner. He tells her, his voice now strained with barely suppressed fury, that he will not provide such information, that she has no right to demand it, and that her continued insubordination will result in immediate, forcible detainment. He reaches for his radio, his fingers fumbling slightly, a telltale sign of his agitation. He is confident that his status, his uniform, his position will protect him, that no one will question his judgment, especially when dealing with a minor incident involving a young black soldier. He is about to make the call, to summon backup, to physically remove her, utterly oblivious to the quiet, formidable power he has now fully unleashed, a power that has been patiently waiting for this precise moment to reveal itself. He is a predator, but he has just cornered a creature far more dangerous than he could ever imagine, a creature that operates on a level of strategic thinking he cannot even begin to comprehend. The sterile hum of the courthouse seems to amplify the silent tension, waiting for the inevitable clash. The air around Agent Sterling Thorne crackles with a raw, unbridled fury that he struggles unsuccessfully to contain. His face, usually a mask of composed disdain, contorts with a mixture of indignation and disbelief. He is accustomed to immediate, unquestioning compliance, to the subtle deference of those around him, especially from individuals he instinctively classifies as lesser. This young black woman, this specialist, asking for his badge number, invoking statutes with such chilling clarity and confidence, is an anomaly his rigidly structured worldview cannot process. He feels a surge of righteous indignation, a burning resentment that someone he considers so utterly beneath him dares to challenge him in this manner, in his domain, under his scrutiny. The audacity of her calm, her unwavering gaze, her precise articulation of legal details. It all fuels a volcanic eruption of rage within him. He tells her, his voice now strained, a guttural growl that barely conceals his seething fury, that he will not provide such information, that she has no right to demand it, and that her continued insubordination will result in immediate, forcible detainment. His hand, trembling slightly, fumbles for the radio clip to his belt, his fingers clumsy with agitation. This is it. This is the breaking point. He is confident that his status, his uniform, his position, his unblemished record will protect him, that no one will question his judgment, especially when dealing with a minor incident involving a young black soldier who is clearly out of her depth. He is about to make the call to summon backup, to physically remove her from his sight, utterly oblivious to the quiet, formidable power he has now fully unleashed, a power that has been patiently waiting for this precise moment to reveal itself. He is a predator, but he has just cornered a creature far more dangerous than he could ever imagine, a creature that operates on a level of strategic thinking he cannot even begin to comprehend. The sterile hum of the courthouse seems to amplify the silent tension, waiting for the inevitable clash. With a sharp, almost violent motion, Thorne snatches the radio from his belt. His thumb presses the transmit button, and a sharp squelch cuts through the hushed murmurs of the lobby, momentarily drawing the attention of a few passers-by who quickly avert their gazes. His voice, though still attempting to project an air of authority, now carries a distinct tremor, a raw edge of barely contained anger that betrays his internal turmoil. He barks into the device, requesting immediate backup at the main security checkpoint, citing a disruptive individual attempting to circumvent established protocols and resisting lawful inquiry. He deliberately omits any mention of her uniform, her rank, or her stated purpose, framing the situation in the most unfavorable light possible, painting her as an aggressor, a defiant hindrance to federal operations. He exaggerates, his words laced with thinly veiled contempt, claiming she is highly uncooperative and exhibiting suspicious behavior inconsistent with routine visitation. He implies a threat, a potential security breach. Knowing these keywords will trigger a rapid response, ensuring his colleagues arrive. Predisposed to his narrative, he glances at Maya, a triumphant, almost predatory glint in his eyes, believing he has now cornered her, that the arrival of reinforcements will finally break her composure and force her into submission. He wants her to see the overwhelming force she is up against, to feel the crushing weight of the federal apparatus bearing down on her. He envisions her flinching, her face finally contorting in fear, her quiet defiance crumbling into desperate pleas. This, he thinks, is the moment she learns her place. He steps even closer, his shadow engulfing her, his imposing frame deliberately invading her personal space, a silent, physical assertion of his dominance. He raises a hand, not quite touching her, but hovering menacingly close to her shoulder, his fingers splayed, a clear, unspoken threat of physical restraint. "You are now under temporary detainment," he states, his voice low and menacing, a statement of fact rather than a warning, dripping with a satisfaction that borders on cruelty. Any further resistance will be met with appropriate force. This is the peak of his discriminatory abuse, a blatant misuse of power, fueled by prejudice and a desperate need to reassert his perceived superiority. He intends to drag her to a holding room, to make her wait for hours, to subject her to endless bureaucratic hurdles, all to teach her a lesson about challenging him. His mind is already constructing the incident report, carefully crafting a narrative that absolves him of any wrongdoing and paints her as the sole instigator, ensuring his record remains pristine while hers is irrevocably tarnished. He imagines the quiet satisfaction of seeing her escorted away, a smug triumph solidifying in his chest, reaffirming his unassailable position. But Maya Jenkins does not flinch. Not a single muscle in her face betrays any fear or capitulation. Her eyes, those deep, intelligent brown pools, remain locked on Thorne's, observing the subtle shifts in his expression, the tightening of his jaw, the almost imperceptible tremor in his hand as he instinctively reaches for the radio clipped to his belt. She understands that his anger is a sign of his diminishing control, a tell that he is operating outside the bounds of proper procedure, a clear indicator that his actions are now driven by personal bias rather than professional protocol. Her internal landscape remains a serene, analytical expanse, a stark contrast to the chaotic storm brewing within Thorne. This entire elaborate confrontation, she realizes, is not an unforeseen incident, but a meticulously engineered scenario, a live-fire exercise designed to expose systemic vulnerabilities within federal law enforcement. She is not merely Specialist Maya Jenkins, a low-ranking soldier. She is a highly specialized operative, a key asset within the Department of Justice's newly formed Strategic Anomaly Response and Data Collection Unit, SARDCU, an entity so covert that its existence is known only to a handful of senior officials at the highest echelons of government. Her mission, far grander and infinitely more complex than a routine briefing, is to identify, document, and ultimately dismantle entrenched biases and discriminatory practices that corrode the very foundation of justice, especially when wielded by those in positions of unchecked authority. Every aspect of her presence, from her carefully selected rank and uniform to her youthful appearance and racial background, has been deliberately curated as part of the operational parameters. These elements, she knows, are designed to elicit the very biases Thorne is so overtly displaying, acting as a precise calibrator for the unit's sophisticated data collection systems. Her ostensibly vulnerable appearance is, in fact, her most potent weapon, a perfect foil to the arrogance of individuals like Thorne, who automatically dismiss what they perceive as weak or insignificant. Her training has been brutal, encompassing years of advanced legal studies, psychological profiling, combat simulations, and, crucially, an unparalleled regimen in maintaining absolute composure under extreme duress. She has faced actors specifically trained to embody this precise brand of entitled authority, to push boundaries, to provoke, to test the limits of her emotional control. She recalls the sterile rooms, the simulated interrogations, the countless hours spent analyzing case law and interagency protocols, drilling the precise legal counterarguments into her very being. The constant mantra of her instructors echoes in her mind, a silent chorus of unwavering resolve. Composure is your shield, fact is your sword, and documentation is your victory. As Thorne barks his distorted narrative into the radio, Maya's right hand almost imperceptibly brushes against the small, custom-fabricated device concealed within the cuff of her uniform sleeve. A tiny, almost invisible indicator light glows green, confirming that the high-fidelity audio recorder, synchronized with a miniature pinhole camera embedded in her lapel, is actively capturing every word, every nuance of Thorne's escalating abuse, every detail of the interaction, even the subtle shifts in his body language. The data stream is encrypted and beamed in real-time to a secure off-site server, where SARDCU analysts are already cross-referencing Thorne's statements with his professional record, his past complaints, and a vast database of behavioral patterns, building a comprehensive profile of his conduct. This confrontation, she realizes, is not merely an unforeseen obstacle. It is the perfect storm, the precise empirical evidence her unit requires to justify its broader mandate and prove its critical necessity. Thorne, in his blind arrogance, is providing the definitive proof, the irrefutable data points that will expose the systemic rot, not just in him, but in the larger structure that has allowed such behavior to persist. She allows a faint, almost imperceptible thought to surface, a cold, calculated assessment. He is performing precisely to specification. The calibration is complete. The data is rich. Even as Thorne raises his hand, the unspoken threat of physical restraint hanging heavy in the air, Maya's voice cuts through the tension, remarkably calm, utterly devoid of any fear, yet imbued with an undeniable, chilling authority that seems to emanate from a profound wellspring of knowledge. She does not shout. She simply speaks, each word a precisely aimed projectile, a surgical strike against his illegitimate authority. "Agent Thorne," she states, her voice clear and resonant, carrying further than its soft volume suggests, cutting through the ambient hum of the courthouse. Your declaration of temporary detainment is unlawful and constitutes a clear breach of federal protocol concerning uniformed service members on official pre-cleared duty. She pauses, allowing the weight of her words to settle, her gaze unwavering, unflinching. Under 10 U.S. Code, Paragraph 802, Article 2, Uniform Code of Military Justice, I am subject to military jurisdiction while on active duty. Furthermore, Department of Justice Directive 3400.02a, Interagency Cooperation and Liaison Procedures with Military Personnel, explicitly states that uniformed service members on official orders, verified through the Joint Personnel Adjudication System, JPAS, are to be granted unimpeded access to federal facilities for scheduled engagements, barring immediate demonstrable threat to national security or explicit, actionable intelligence of criminal intent. She recites the regulations with the fluidity of someone who has not merely read them, but lived them, their implications deeply ingrained in her operational philosophy. Her words, delivered with the rhythmic precision of a legal scholar, begin to chip away at Thorne's carefully constructed facade. His hand, hovering near her shoulder, falters slightly, its menacing posture dissolving into an awkward suspension. The triumphant gleam in his eyes flickers, replaced by a nascent confusion, a dawning uncertainty. He had expected bluster, or pleas, or perhaps even tears, not this calm, intellectual counterbarrage, delivered with such specific legal citations and an almost academic detachment. He finds himself momentarily at a loss for words, a rare and deeply irritating sensation that gnaws at his self-perception. He had anticipated an easy victory, a swift reassertion of his dominance, but she is not playing by his rules, or rather, she is playing by all the rules, the ones he conveniently ignores. His mental image of her as a simple, easily intimidated junior soldier shatters, replaced by a growing unease, a cold dread beginning to seep into his certainty. He finds himself trying to recall the specifics of the directives she cites, vaguely aware that such protocols exist, but never having bothered to memorize the precise articles or their implications, believing them to be irrelevant to his day-to-day operations. He had always relied on the general assumption of his authority, the deference of others, and his ability to bend rules without consequence. Now, the weight of his ignorance presses down on him. Maya continues, her voice gaining a subtle, almost imperceptible edge of formal severity, each word a further tightening of the legal noose around Thorne's neck. Your actions, Agent Thorne, including your refusal to provide your badge number and supervisor's name upon request, your false report to dispatch regarding my status, and your attempt to unlawfully detain a service member engaged in official duties, constitute several severe violations. These include, but are not limited to, obstruction of official government business under 18 U.S. Code, Paragraph 1505, misuse of authority under agency regulations, and potential violations of my civil liberties under the Fourth Amendment, specifically regarding unlawful seizure without probable cause, and the Fifth Amendment, concerning due process. She articulates each point with deliberate clarity, as if dictating a formal complaint to an unseen stenographer, her tone unwavering. Be advised, Agent Thorne, that this entire interaction, from your initial discriminatory questioning to your current attempt at unlawful detainment and your false report to dispatch, is being fully documented and recorded, and will be immediately forwarded to the Department of Justice's Office of Professional Responsibility and the Inspector General's Office, as well as to my commanding officer and the Joint Legal Services Command for formal review and potential prosecution. The mention of recorded hits Thorne like a physical blow. His eyes widen almost imperceptibly, a cold jolt of fear sparking in his chest, spreading like ice water through his veins. He glances around, his gaze darting nervously, desperately searching for a visible camera, a recording device, anything that could corroborate her claim. He sees nothing, only the sterile, polished surfaces of the lobby, the distant, oblivious flow of people, their hurried steps and hushed conversations continuing as if the world has not just tilted on its axis for him. But her unwavering confidence, her absolute certainty in her statement, unnerves him profoundly. The thought that his rash, prejudiced words and actions might be captured, might be used against him, sends a sickening wave through his gut. He had always operated with an implicit understanding that his word, his authority was paramount, unquestioned. He had always been the one in control, the one who dictated the narrative, the one who determined truth. Now, this young woman, this specialist he so readily dismissed, is calmly dismantling his authority, brick by brick, using his own words and actions as the very tools of his undoing, and recording every damning piece of evidence. His carefully constructed facade of professional calm shatters completely. His face flushes a deeper red, a visible stain of shame and panic rising from his neck to his hairline, and a bead of sweat, tiny and glistening, appears on his temple, tracing a cold path towards his eyebrow. His confident posture sags almost imperceptibly, his broad shoulders hunching forward, his chest deflating. He tries to speak, but his throat feels tight, constricted, words catching, forming only a strangled gasp. He manages a strained, You have no authority to make such demands. This is a federal facility. I am a federal agent." His voice is higher now, shrill, lacking its usual resonant depth, betraying his escalating panic, the desperate unraveling of his control. He is no longer projecting authority. He is desperately clinging to it, waving it like a drowning man grasping at a flimsy life raft, his voice a frantic plea rather than a command. His mind races, frantically trying to reconcile his prejudice with her undeniable competence, her detailed legal knowledge. Is she part of an internal sting operation? Is this a test? He feels a chilling premonition, a dawning realization that he might have made a grave, career-ending mistake. The king realizes he might have just challenged an unexpected queen, one who understands the rules of the game far better than he ever did, and who has been meticulously prepared to expose his every violation. Just then, two uniformed security officers, responding to Thorne's radio call, approach rapidly from a side corridor, their expressions grim and purposeful. They move with the practiced efficiency of individuals accustomed to swift intervention, their hands instinctively hovering near their holstered weapons, their eyes scanning the scene for the implied threat. Thorne, seeing them, feels a brief surge of desperate relief, a fleeting hope that their arrival will somehow restore his control, allowing him to reassert his dominance through sheer numbers. He gestures sharply towards Maya, his hand shaking slightly, attempting to convey urgency and an immediate threat, to force them into his narrative. "Officers, this individual is resisting detainment and making false accusations. Secure her," he barks, his voice regaining a desperate edge of command but laced with a frantic undertone. He believes that with physical backup, he can override her legal arguments, that brute force will trump her inconvenient knowledge, that his reputation will shield him. He is utterly oblivious to the quiet, almost imperceptible signal Maya gives, a subtle glance towards her lapel, a fractional tightening of her jaw, a signal that is not for Thorne, but for the unseen audience, the analysts silently observing his every move from miles away, meticulously documenting his every misstep, every prejudiced word, every abusive action. The sterile hum of the courthouse lobby, once a low drone, now seems to resonate with the silent hum of unseen technology, recording, analyzing, and preparing for the profound shift that is about to ripple through the rigid walls of power, dismantling the very structures Thorne so arrogantly represents. Thorne, in his blind rage and deep-seated prejudice, has activated the very mechanism designed to dismantle him, and he has no idea what is coming. The sterile hum of the federal courthouse lobby, once a constant, unobtrusive drone, now seems to vibrate with an almost palpable tension, amplifying the sharp, deliberate footsteps of the two approaching security officers, their grim, purposeful expressions and hands instinctively hovering near their holstered weapons, speak of a readiness for swift, decisive intervention, their eyes scanning the scene for the implied threat Thorne has so vehemently reported. Agent Sterling Thorne, seeing them, feels a brief, desperate surge of relief, a fleeting hope that their arrival will somehow restore his shattered control, allowing him to reassert his dominance through sheer numbers and the unquestioning obedience he expects from subordinates. He gestures sharply towards Maya, his hand trembling slightly, attempting to convey urgency and an immediate threat to force them into his distorted narrative. His voice, still shrill with panic but now attempting to regain a semblance of command, barks at them, telling them to secure the individual, that she is resisting detainment and making false accusations. He believes that with physical backup, he can override her inconvenient legal arguments, that brute force will trump her inconvenient knowledge, that his reputation will shield him from any repercussions. He is utterly oblivious to the quiet, almost imperceptible signal Maya gives, a subtle glance towards her lapel, a fractional tightening of her jaw, a signal that is not for Thorne, but for the unseen audience, the SAR-DCU analysts silently observing his every move from miles away, meticulously documenting his every misstep, every prejudiced word, every abusive action. But Maya Jenkins does not wait for the officers to reach her, nor does she allow Thorne's frantic commands to take root. As the two uniformed figures close the distance, their initial focus locked on Thorne's agitated form and his pointing hand, Maya shifts her stance, her posture remaining militarily precise, yet radiating an unexpected quiet authority that immediately draws their attention. Her voice, clear and resonant, cuts through Thorne's agitated barks, a calm, steady counterpoint to his escalating hysteria. She addresses the approaching officers directly, her gaze unwavering, her tone devoid of any emotion, yet imbued with a chilling undercurrent of absolute control. She informs them, with the precision of a seasoned legal expert, that she is Specialist Maya Jenkins, United States Army, on official duty with pre-verified federal clearance, and that she is currently being unlawfully obstructed and falsely accused by Agent Sterling Thorne. She does not raise her voice, but each word lands with the weight of undisputed fact, designed to disarm, to inform, and to compel. The officers, caught off guard by her composure and the directness of her address, hesitate, their practiced movements faltering. Their eyes flick from Thorne's red, contorted face to Maya's serene, intelligent features, a flicker of confusion crossing their professional masks. They are accustomed to clear directives, to unambiguous threats, but this situation is rapidly devolving into something far more complex, far less straightforward than Thorne's radio call suggested. Maya seizes this moment of uncertainty, pressing her advantage with surgical precision. She informs the officers that Agent Thorne has falsely reported her as a disruptive individual, attempting to circumvent established protocols and resisting lawful inquiry, deliberately omitting her status as a uniformed service member on official orders. She states with unwavering certainty that his report constitutes a deliberate misrepresentation of facts, a serious breach of federal reporting standards, and a clear attempt to misuse his authority to initiate an unlawful detainment. She then calmly reminds them that she has already informed Agent Thorne that this entire interaction, from its discriminatory inception, is being meticulously documented and recorded, and that their actions in response to his unlawful directives will also be part of the official record. The word recorded hangs in the air, a silent, potent threat that immediately causes the officers to stiffen, their eyes dart between Maya and Thorne, a dawning realization etching itself onto their faces. They are trained professionals, acutely aware of the implications of being implicated in an unlawful act, especially one that is being actively documented. They instinctively lower their hands from their holsters, their postures shifting from ready intervention to cautious observation. They are now evaluating the situation for themselves, no longer merely obeying a superior's frantic commands. Thorne, witnessing this subtle but critical shift in their demeanor, feels a fresh wave of ice-cold panic wash over him. His face, already flushed with anger, now pales to an ashen gray. He sees the officers' hesitation, their dawning suspicion, and the terrifying realization solidifies in his gut. He is losing control. He tries to interject, to regain their attention, to reassert his narrative, but his voice comes out as a choked, desperate croak, devoid of its earlier authority. He can feel his carefully constructed world beginning to crumble around him. Maya, ignoring Thorne's sputtering attempts to interrupt, continues, her voice gaining a subtle, almost imperceptible edge of formal severity, each word a further tightening of the legal noose around Thorne's neck. She reminds the officers, with the rhythmic precision of a legal scholar, that under 10 U.S. Code Paragraph 802, Article 2, Uniform Code of Military Justice, she is subject to military jurisdiction while on active duty. She then cites Department of Justice Directive 3400.02a, Interagency Cooperation and Liaison Procedures with Military Personnel, emphasizing that uniformed service members on official orders, verified through the Joint Personnel Adjudication System, JPS, are to be granted unimpeded access to federal facilities for scheduled engagements, barring immediate, demonstrable, threat to national security or explicit, actionable intelligence of criminal intent. She articulates these specific legal and procedural details with the fluidity of someone who has not merely read them, but lived them, their implications deeply ingrained in her operational philosophy. Her knowledge is not theoretical. It is operational, applied, and devastatingly precise. She then turns her gaze directly to Thorne, her eyes piercing, holding his in a silent, chilling accusation. Her voice, though still calm, now carries a weight that seems to press down on him, physically forcing the air from his lungs. She informs him that his declaration of temporary detainment is unlawful and constitutes a clear breach of federal protocol concerning uniformed service members on official, pre-cleared duty. She systematically lists his violations, each point a hammer blow to his remaining composure: his refusal to provide his badge number and supervisor's name upon request, his false report to dispatch regarding her status, and his attempt to unlawfully detain a service member engaged in official duties. These actions, she states, constitute several severe violations, including but not limited to obstruction of official government business under 18 U.S. Code Paragraph 1505, misuse of authority under agency regulations, and potential violations of her civil liberties under the Fourth Amendment, specifically regarding unlawful seizure without probable cause, and the Fifth Amendment, concerning due process. She articulates each point with deliberate clarity, as if dictating a formal complaint to an unseen stenographer, her tone unwavering, her composure absolute. The two security officers exchange a quick, uneasy glance. They recognize the statutes, the directives, the legal implications. This is not some low-level soldier making baseless claims. This is a highly knowledgeable individual systematically dismantling a federal agent's actions with an almost terrifying precision. They understand the gravity of Maya's accusations, the potential career-ending consequences for Thorne, and, by extension, for anyone who might be perceived as complicit. Their posture now reflects a profound internal conflict, a struggle between their ingrained deference to Thorne's rank and the undeniable weight of Maya's legal arguments. They are no longer Thorne's unquestioning backup. They are witnesses, and potentially unwilling participants in a rapidly unfolding crisis. They begin to subtly distance themselves from Thorne, their bodies shifting, creating a small, almost imperceptible buffer zone between him and Maya. Thorne's face, a moment ago flushed with anger, is now a sickly pale. The bead of sweat on his temple has multiplied, trickling down his jawline, a visible sign of his profound distress. His earlier triumph has evaporated, replaced by a cold, suffocating dread. The word recorded echoes in his mind, a deafening clang that drowns out all other thoughts. He glances around wildly, desperately searching for a visible camera, a recording device, anything that could corroborate her claim. He sees nothing, only the sterile, polished surfaces of the lobby, the distant, oblivious flow of people, their hurried steps and hushed conversations continuing as if the world has not just tilted on its axis for him. But her unwavering confidence, her absolute certainty in her statement, unnerves him profoundly. The thought that his rash, prejudiced words and actions, his contemptuous internal monologue might be captured, might be used against him, sends a sickening wave through his gut. He had always operated with an implicit understanding that his word, his authority, was paramount, unquestioned. He had always been the one in control, the one who dictated the narrative, the one who determined truth. Now, this young woman, this specialist he so readily dismissed, is calmly dismantling his authority, brick by brick, using his own words and actions as the very tools of his undoing, and recording every damning piece of evidence. His carefully constructed facade of professional calm shatters completely. His confident posture sags almost imperceptibly, his broad shoulders hunching forward, his chest deflating. He tries to speak, but his throat feels tight, constricted, words catching, forming only a strangled gasp. He manages a strained guttural sound, something like a desperate plea. You have no right. This is outrageous. I am a federal agent." His voice is higher now, shrill, lacking its usual resonant depth, betraying his escalating panic, the desperate unraveling of his control. He is no longer projecting authority. He is desperately clinging to it, waving it like a drowning man grasping at a flimsy life raft. His voice a frantic plea rather than a command. His mind races, frantically trying to reconcile his prejudice with her undeniable competence, her detailed legal knowledge. Is she part of an internal sting operation? Is this a test? He feels a chilling premonition, a dawning realization that he might have made a grave, career-ending mistake. The king realizes he might have just challenged an unexpected queen, one who understands the rules of the game far better than he ever did, and who's been meticulously prepared to expose his every violation. Maya's gaze never leaves Thorne's face, observing his rapid descent into fear and desperation. She allows a beat of silence to hang in the air, letting the full weight of her previous statements settle. Then she delivers the final, decisive blow, her voice still calm, but now infused with an undeniable, chilling finality. She states, with absolute clarity, that she must respectfully request Agent Thorne's immediate compliance with federal interagency protocols by providing his badge number, the name of his immediate supervisor, and a formal explanation for his unlawful actions. She states that failure to comply will result in an immediate, formal complaint filed with the Department of Justice's Office of Professional Responsibility and the Inspector General's Office, directly implicating him in a pattern of discriminatory behavior and gross misuse of authority. She adds, her voice unwavering, that this complaint will also be forwarded to her commanding officer and the Joint Legal Services Command for potential prosecution under relevant military and civilian statutes. She emphasizes that the extensive recorded evidence will leave no room for doubt regarding his conduct. The power dynamic has visibly, irrevocably shifted. Maya, once perceived as a vulnerable, low-ranking soldier, now stands as the undeniable arbiter of the situation, her quiet composure a stark contrast to Thorne's frantic unraveling. The two security officers, now fully understanding the precariousness of their position, turn their attention from Thorne's impotent rage to Maya, their expressions indicating a readiness to follow her directives. They look at her with a newfound respect, even a subtle awe for her unwavering composure and her profound knowledge. They understand that she is not just a specialist, she is a force, a quiet storm of legal and procedural expertise. Thorne, utterly defeated, watches in dazed horror as the officers, instead of rushing to his aid, now look to Maya for guidance, their hands now fully removed from their holsters, their postures signaling de-escalation rather than confrontation. He has lost them. He has lost everything. He stands isolated in the bustling lobby, a man stripped bare of his authority, his prejudice exposed, his career hanging by a thread, utterly broken by the quiet, formidable power he so arrogantly unleashed. The sterile hum of the courthouse lobby seems to morph into a silent, triumphant chorus, celebrating the profound shift that has just occurred within its rigid walls, a shift orchestrated by the quiet specialist he so foolishly underestimated. The air within the federal courthouse lobby, once vibrant with the low thrum of countless lives intersecting, now thrums with a new, profound silence, a heavy stillness that seems to press down on every individual present. Agent Sterling Thorne, moments ago a towering figure of unassailable authority, stands utterly defeated, his broad shoulders slumped, his chest deflated, a man stripped bare of his carefully constructed facade. The confident sneer that habitually played at the corners of his mouth has vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of abject horror and dawning comprehension. A thick, clammy sweat now coats his brow, tracing cold paths down his ashen cheeks, a stark contrast to the meticulously maintained composure he so prided himself on. His piercing gray eyes, once glinting with dismissive superiority, dart wildly around the grand hall, searching desperately for an escape, a denial, any shred of the power that is so spectacularly evaporated. He looks at the two security officers, his supposed backup, their faces now registering a mixture of professional concern and unmistakable censure, their hands no longer hovering near their holsters, but hanging loosely at their sides, signaling a complete de-escalation of force and, more damningly, a clear withdrawal of allegiance. They no longer look to him for direction. Their gazes, heavy with silent judgment, are fixed on Specialist Maya Jenkins, the young woman Thorne so arrogantly underestimated. Maya, however, does not gloat, does not celebrate. Her posture remains militarily precise, her expression a study in unwavering composure, a quiet, formidable presence that seems to absorb the chaos around her. Her deep brown eyes, clear and unblinking, hold Thorne's gaze not with malice, but with a cool, analytical detachment, as if he is merely a specimen under a microscope. His breakdown a predictable outcome in a carefully controlled experiment. She allows the silence to hang, letting the full, crushing weight of her previous statements settle upon Thorne, upon the officers, and upon the few curious onlookers who have subtly paused their hurried journeys, sensing the seismic shift in the power dynamic. Then her voice, still calm and measured, yet now imbued with an undeniable, chilling authority, cuts through the heavy air. She issues her directives not to Thorne, who is now a mere bystander in his own unraveling, but directly to the two security officers. She informs them, with the precision of a commanding officer, that their assistance is no longer required for her, as she has successfully de-escalated the situation through established federal protocols. She then, with a subtle inclination of her head towards Thorne, quietly requests that they secure Agent Thorne and immediately contact his immediate superior, along with the Department of Justice's Office of Professional Responsibility, stating that a formal complaint regarding gross misuse of authority and multiple federal violations is being filed against him, with irrefutable live-streamed evidence. Her words are delivered with such quiet certainty, such absolute command, that the officers instinctively nod, their previous hesitation completely gone, replaced by a professional urgency to comply with her unstated but clearly understood authority. They understand the situation with chilling clarity. Thorne is no longer their superior. He is now a liability, a documented incident of misconduct waiting to be processed. Thorne watches paralyzed as the two officers, his supposed reinforcements, turn their backs on him, their bodies now positioned not to protect him, but to contain him, their gazes now locked on his every twitch, every desperate gasp for air. He sees the subtle shift in their stance, the way their hands now rest on their belts, not near their weapons, but in a posture of readiness for non-lethal restraint. He tries to speak, to protest, to reclaim some semblance of his former authority, but his throat is constricted, his voice a pathetic, strangled croak. His mind screams in a cacophony of denial and terror. This is impossible. She is a specialist, a low-ranking black woman. How? The carefully constructed edifice of his prejudice, his belief in his own infallible judgment, collapses in on itself, crushing him under its weight. He sees the quiet, knowing glances the officers exchange, a silent understanding passing between them that he is no longer the powerful Agent Thorne, but merely a disgraced federal employee awaiting public humiliation. The faint, lingering scent of stale coffee and disinfectant in the lobby seems to morph into the acrid smell of his own fear, the metallic taste of defeat coating his tongue. Just as the officers begin to move towards Thorne, a new presence enters the grand hall, an arrival that commands attention not with bluster, but with an almost surgical precision. A contingent of 5 individuals, dressed in impeccably tailored dark gray suits distinct from the standard federal agency attire, moves swiftly and silently through the lobby, their movements synchronized, their expressions devoid of emotion, yet radiating an undeniable, profound authority. They are not merely security, they are something else entirely, their presence exuding an aura of high-level government intervention. Leading them is a woman in her late 50s, her silver hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun, her face etched with intelligence and an almost frightening gravitas. This is Director Anya Sharma, the clandestine head of the Department of Justice's Strategic Anomaly Response and Data Collection Unit, SARDCU, a unit so covert that its very existence is classified at the highest levels of national security. Director Sharma's eyes, a piercing, almost unnerving shade of green, sweep over the scene, taking in Thorne's disheveled state, the officer's cautious postures, and Maya's unwavering composure. Her gaze lingers on Maya for a fraction of a second, and a barely perceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement of a mission accomplished, passes between them. It is a nod of profound respect, of a superior recognizing the exceptional execution of a critical operation by a highly valued asset. She then turns her full attention to Thorne, her expression hardening, her gaze utterly devoid of sympathy, replaced by a cold, professional assessment. She does not raise her voice, but her words, delivered with a chilling clarity, cut through the hushed tension of the lobby like a finely honed blade. Agent Sterling Thorne, Director Sharma states, her voice a low, resonant contralto that carries an undeniable weight of absolute authority. Effective immediately, your federal commission is suspended. Your badge and weapon are hereby confiscated, pending a full, comprehensive investigation by the Office of Professional Responsibility, the Inspector General's Office, and the Joint Legal Services Command. Her words are not a question, not a suggestion, but an irreversible decree. Two of her accompanying agents step forward, moving with practiced efficiency. One reaches for Thorne's belt, unholstering his service weapon with a swift, decisive motion. The other, with a firm, almost clinical touch, unclips his federal agent's badge from his lapel. Thorne, too stunned, too broken to resist, offers no protest, no struggle. He simply stands there, numb, watching as the symbols of his power, his identity, are systematically stripped away. The glint of his silver watch, a substantial piece of Swiss engineering, seems to mock him from his wrist, a final, ironic testament to the expensive tastes he can no longer afford to maintain. Director Sharma continues, her voice unwavering, each word a further nail in the coffin of Thorne's career. She informs him that the charges against him are severe and extensive, including obstruction of official government business under 18 U.S. Code, paragraph 1505, gross misuse of authority, false reporting to federal dispatch, and multiple violations of civil liberties under the Fourth and Fifth Amendments, specifically pertaining to unlawful seizure without probable cause and due process. She emphasizes, her gaze fixed directly on his now vacant eyes, that the entirety of his misconduct, from his initial discriminatory questioning of Specialist Jenkins to his false report and his attempt at unlawful detainment, has been meticulously documented and recorded by SARDCU's advanced covert systems. She states that the evidence is irrefutable, leaving no room for doubt or denial regarding his prejudiced actions and his blatant disregard for federal protocols. Thorne's mind, once a fortress of self-assured judgment, is now a shattered landscape of regret and terror. He finally understands. This specialist, this young black woman whom he had so readily dismissed as a minor inconvenience, a pawn to be controlled, is in fact a highly specialized operative, a human instrument designed to expose the very systemic biases he embodies. Her youthful appearance, her low rank, her racial background, all of it was a carefully constructed lure, a precision-engineered trigger designed to elicit his prejudice, to make him reveal the rot beneath the surface. He realizes with a sickening lurch that his entire interaction with her was a meticulously orchestrated trap, and he, in his arrogance, walked directly into it, providing every damning piece of evidence himself. The recorded he heard her mention was not a bluff. It was a cold, unyielding reality, capturing his every biased word, his every abusive action, his every desperate attempt to cling to power. He is not merely being investigated, he is being made an example of. His downfall a public spectacle for the very institution he believed he served. Director Sharma gestures to two of her agents, who step forward and position themselves on either side of Thorne. Their movements are firm, professional, leaving no room for resistance, yet they offer no unnecessary physical contact, merely a silent, inescapable escort. "You will be escorted from the premises," Director Sharma states, her voice echoing with finality, "and transported to a secure facility for debriefing. You are advised that any attempt to obstruct this process will result in additional charges." As Thorne is led away, his head bowed, his once imposing figure now appearing small and broken, he glances back, a desperate pleading look in his eyes, searching for something, anything, in Maya's expression. But her face remains impassive, her gaze cool and analytical, utterly devoid of triumph or pity. She simply watches him go, a quiet sentinel of justice. The two courthouse security officers, witnessing the swift, decisive intervention of Director Sharma and her team, now stand at rigid attention, their respect for Maya palpable, their understanding of the true hierarchy of power irrevocably reset. The subtle murmurs of the lobby begin to return, but they are different now, tinged with a new awareness, a quiet recognition of the profound shift that has just occurred. Maya, no longer needing to maintain the facade of vulnerability, adjusts the strap of her small regulation-issue black backpack. The tiny, almost invisible indicator light within her cuff, which had glowed green throughout the confrontation, now blinks 3 times, signaling the successful completion of data transmission and mission objective. She then turns, her steps measured and deliberate, towards the Department of Justice's Military Liaison Office, not for a routine briefing, but for a full debriefing of a highly successful critical operation. Her mission, to expose and document systemic bias within federal authority, has achieved its first undeniable victory. The sterile hum of the federal courthouse lobby now seems to resonate with the silent hum of unseen technology, recording, analyzing, and preparing for the profound shift that will ripple through the rigid walls of power, dismantling the very structures Thorne so arrogantly represented, one prejudiced action at a time. The quiet specialist, whom he so foolishly underestimated, has not only exposed him but has initiated a systemic change far greater than he could ever have imagined, a new era of accountability dawning in the heart of federal justice. The sterile hum of the federal courthouse lobby, once a low, persistent drone, now seems to resonate with a different kind of energy, a quiet, almost reverent atmosphere that acknowledges a profound shift in the very fabric of its authority. Agent Sterling Thorne, a man whose very presence once commanded attention through an aggressive self-assurance, now moves through the stark corridors of the secure facility, his broad shoulders slumped, his once trim physique appearing diminished, almost shrunken within the confines of a plain, standard-issue jumpsuit. The meticulous tailoring of his charcoal suits, the perfectly symmetrical knot of his deep sapphire blue ties, the subtle gleam of his substantial Swiss watch, all remnants of a former life, a meticulously curated image of power and control that has been irrevocably shattered. His piercing gray eyes, once holding a glint of dismissive superiority, now possess a vacant, haunted quality, darting nervously, desperately, as if perpetually searching for an escape from the suffocating reality of his new existence. The faint, almost imperceptible sneer that habitually played at the corners of his mouth has vanished entirely, replaced by a perpetual grimace of profound regret and dawning terror. He is no longer the bulwark against chaos. He is the chaos, a stark example of unchecked power consumed by its own prejudice. The scent of ozone and chemical disinfectant still lingers, but for Thorne, it now carries the metallic tang of his own fear, the acrid stench of a career meticulously built, and then spectacularly demolished by his own hubris. His initial hours in the secure holding facility are a blur of disoriented disbelief, followed by a crushing wave of denial. He paces the small windowless room, his mind replaying the confrontation in the lobby, desperately searching for a misstep, a flaw in Maya Jenkins's flawless execution, a moment where he could have regained control. He tells himself, repeatedly, that it was a setup, an unfair ambush, that he was targeted. He screams internally that his authority is absolute, that she was the insubordinate one, the provocateur. But the echoes of Maya's calm, precise articulation of legal statutes, the chilling certainty in her voice as she listed his violations, gnaw at the edges of his desperate self-preservation. The memory of Director Sharma's cold, unwavering gaze, the swift clinical confiscation of his badge and weapon, are indelible images burned into his psyche. He feels an overwhelming sense of violation, of being utterly exposed. He had believed himself immune, above the fray, his position ensuring that any rules he bent or broke would be overlooked, forgiven, or simply never discovered. The reality that his every prejudiced action, his every arrogant thought was meticulously recorded, live-streamed, and analyzed, is a torment he cannot escape. He imagines the SAR-DCU analysts, unseen and unknown, dissecting his every word, every facial twitch, every telltale sign of his inherent bias, transforming his private prejudices into irrefutable public evidence. The debriefing process for Thorne is relentless, a meticulously orchestrated dismantling of his defenses. He faces a rotating team of interrogators from the Office of Professional Responsibility and the Inspector General's office, their questions precise, their demeanor unyielding. They present him with the evidence, crystal clear audio recordings of his condescending tone, his demands for identification, his dismissal of Maya's explanation, his false report to dispatch, his explicit threats of unlawful detainment. They show him silent video footage from the pinhole camera, capturing his sneer, his aggressive body language, the moment his hand hovered menacingly near Maya's shoulder. They cross-reference his statements with his past performance reviews, internal complaints that had been quietly dismissed, and even anonymous tips regarding his conduct towards certain demographics. He attempts to deny, to deflect, to rationalize his actions as legitimate security concerns, but his words ring hollow against the weight of the objective data. His voice, once resonant with self-importance, now cracks under the pressure, his explanations devolving into desperate pleas and incoherent ramblings. He finally breaks, not with tears, but with a defeated guttural cry, acknowledging the futility of his resistance. He admits, in a broken whisper, that he perceived Maya as a threat, not because of her actions, but because of his own preconceived notions, his ingrained biases, seeing her youth, her race, her low rank as inherent liabilities, as invitations for him to assert his dominance. The admission, though forced, is a stark testament to the systematic nature of the prejudice SAR-DQ was designed to expose. Within days, the formal charges against Agent Sterling Thorne are announced. The Department of Justice issues a terse, unequivocal statement confirming his immediate and permanent termination from federal service, citing gross misconduct, misuse of authority, and violations of civil liberties. His badge number is publicly revoked, his federal pension and benefits are immediately frozen, and a full criminal investigation is initiated, focusing on obstruction of official government business and false reporting. The news, though initially circulated through internal channels, quickly leaks to the national media, becoming a high-profile case. Thorne, once an anonymous but powerful figure within the federal apparatus, becomes a symbol of unchecked authority and systemic discrimination. His face plastered across news channels and online forums. The public reaction is swift and severe. Outrage and condemnation pour in, highlighting the pervasive issue of abuse of power within law enforcement. His name becomes synonymous with disgrace, his reputation irrevocably tarnished. He faces the very real prospect of criminal charges, the loss of his freedom, and a lifetime of public opprobrium. His colleagues, once deferential, now distance themselves. His superiors, who once trusted his judgment, now denounce his actions, and the public, once ignorant of his specific abuses, now knows him only as the disgraced agent who targeted a quiet professional soldier. The king has truly fallen, stripped of his crown, his kingdom, and his dignity. Meanwhile, Specialist Maya Jenkins experiences a vastly different aftermath. After Thorne's ignominious removal, she is immediately escorted by Director Sharma to a secure, private debriefing room deep within the courthouse's highly classified SARDCU operational wing. The room, unlike the austere public spaces, is state-of-the-art, equipped with advanced holographic displays and secure communication systems. Director Sharma's expression, usually a mask of professional gravitas, holds a subtle flicker of satisfaction, a rare acknowledgement of a major success. She informs Maya that the mission, codenamed Project Veritas, has achieved its primary objective with exemplary precision. Every detail of Thorne's misconduct, his every biased word and action, has been meticulously captured, analyzed, and cross-referenced with pre-existing data on similar behavioral patterns within the federal system. The irrefutable evidence gathered from this single critical encounter provides the foundational empirical data needed to justify SARDCU's broader mandate and to initiate sweeping, systemic reforms. Maya, though physically and mentally drained from the intense, prolonged psychological pressure of the confrontation, maintains her composure. She recounts the incident with the same analytical precision she displayed in the lobby, her voice calm, her memory sharp, her observations astute. She describes Thorne's escalating anger, his attempts to intimidate, his desperate clinging to authority, and the subtle shift in the security officer's demeanor as they process the conflicting narratives. She articulates her own internal processes, her adherence to protocol, her strategic deployment of legal citations, and her unwavering commitment to the mission. Director Sharma listens intently, occasionally nodding, her piercing green eyes reflecting a profound respect for Maya's performance. She commends Maya not just for her courage and composure under duress, but for her unparalleled mastery of interagency protocols and her strategic genius in allowing Thorne to fully expose himself. She tells Maya that her actions have not only brought justice to a single perpetrator, but have illuminated a pervasive, insidious problem within the federal system that can now be effectively addressed. Maya's name is immediately and unequivocally cleared. She receives a formal commendation for exceptional service and valor, delivered personally by Director Sharma, a rare honor for a specialist. Her immediate future involves a period of rest and psychological debriefing, followed by an accelerated promotion to a senior analytical and field operative role within SARDCU, a trajectory that bypasses years of conventional military career progression. She is no longer merely a specialist. She is recognized as a quiet vanguard, a living testament to the power of intelligence, composure, and unwavering dedication to justice. Her vindication is not just personal. It is a powerful affirmation of the principles she embodies, a quiet triumph for accountability over prejudice. The long-term impact of Maya Jenkins's actions and Project Veritas ripples through the entire federal justice system, initiating a profound and irreversible shift. Thorne's case becomes a landmark precedent, a stark warning against the misuse of authority and the insidious nature of unchecked bias. SARDCU, initially a clandestine unit, gains unprecedented funding and expanded authority. Its mandate broadened to proactively identify and address systemic discrimination across all federal agencies. The unit establishes a confidential, independent, reporting mechanism for federal employees and the public to report instances of perceived bias or abuse of authority, ensuring that no complaint, no matter how minor, goes uninvestigated. New policies are rapidly developed and implemented, transforming the landscape of federal law enforcement. Mandatory, rigorous bias awareness training, far beyond superficial workshops, becomes standard for all federal agents, focusing on implicit biases, cultural competency, and ethical conduct. These programs incorporate real-world case studies, including Thorne's, to illustrate the tangible consequences of prejudice. Interagency protocols are thoroughly revised, particularly those governing interactions between civilian law enforcement and uniformed military personnel, emphasizing mutual respect, clear lines of communication, and immediate verification of official status through secure channels like JPass. Accountability mechanisms are significantly strengthened, creating independent oversight boards with the power to investigate and sanction agents, reducing the likelihood of internal cover-ups or dismissals of legitimate complaints. Past complaints against agents, especially those involving allegations of discrimination, are systematically reviewed, leading to the reopening of numerous cases and the disciplinary action or termination of several other agents who had previously escaped scrutiny. Hiring practices across federal agencies undergo a radical overhaul, emphasizing diversity, empathy, and a demonstrable commitment to civil liberties, alongside traditional qualifications. Recruitment efforts actively seek candidates from marginalized communities, recognizing that lived experience can be a powerful antidote to institutional bias. The goal is to cultivate a new generation of federal agents who embody justice, not merely enforce laws. This systemic change is not instantaneous or without resistance. There are initial murmurs of discontent from entrenched elements within various agencies, those who resent the increased scrutiny and the erosion of their unquestioned authority. But the irrefutable evidence from Project Veritas and the public outcry that accompanies Thorne's disgrace creates an undeniable momentum for reform. Over time, a slow but undeniable cultural shift begins to take root within federal law enforcement, moving towards greater transparency, accountability, and a profound respect for the civil liberties of all citizens. The idea that no one is above the law, regardless of their rank or position, becomes a deeply ingrained principle, a new ethos for the guardians of justice. Public trust, which had been eroding for decades, slowly begins to rebuild, particularly in communities that had historically borne the brunt of discriminatory practices. The knowledge that there are dedicated units like CRDCU and individuals like Maya Jenkins actively working to ensure fairness and uphold the highest ideals of justice fosters a renewed sense of hope and security. The story of Specialist Maya Jenkins, though largely confined to classified circles, becomes a quiet legend within CRDCU, a testament to the power of quiet courage and strategic brilliance. Her actions serve as an enduring reminder that justice is not merely an abstract concept or a set of laws inscribed in books. It is a living, breathing force, constantly requiring vigilance, dedication, and the unwavering resolve of individuals who dare to stand up against abuse even when facing seemingly insurmountable authority. It is a powerful message that true strength lies not in the arbitrary power of a badge or a uniform, but in the unyielding integrity of one's character, the precision of one's knowledge, and the courage to demand accountability. The long, arduous journey towards true equality and systemic fairness continues. But Maya's quiet stand in the federal courthouse lobby marks a definitive turning point, a powerful affirmation that the arc of the moral universe, though long, indeed bends towards justice, propelled forward by the quiet, formidable actions of those who refuse to be silenced. The sterile hum of the federal courthouse lobby, once a symbol of rigid, unyielding power, now subtly vibrates with the promise of a more equitable future, a future where justice is truly blind, and where every individual, regardless of their appearance or perceived status, is treated with the inherent dignity and respect they deserve.